Okay, welcome to Section 2 of the MBYLL State of the League. Again, my name is Kevin Barney, Director of Sales and Marketing for MBYLL, and joining me is Jim Dalton, the President of the Board of Directors, and Mary Ayotte, the Vice President of Operations for the Board of Directors for Mass Bay Youth Lacrosse. In this section, we have a couple questions. We're going to start out, want to ask a little bit, we'll direct this to you, Jim, talk a little bit about this past year, an overview of kind of when and why certain decisions were made by the board as we move through March, April, and into May.
Sure. It was madness, as you and Mary have lived through as well. But we were doing the coaches clinics. We had just started. We were at St. John's Prep, and all of a sudden we learn about this virus, and it all just comes tumbling down very, very fast. And we just start to make a series of decisions. At that point, the board we started doing weekly virtual meetings, and we did those weekly virtual meetings for months. We really learned a lot about Zoom, and there was a lot to it. So we had to weigh so many things along the way about what were we going to do? Could we salvage something? First of all, could we delay the season? Then could we salvage something? Then could we, it was almost like we went piecemeal to try to save as much as possible. But we also knew from the towns and their directors that they wanted to keep that insurance, with the hopes that we would play, even if we couldn't play in the spring, it would be late spring or summer or even fall. And our membership really is year round now, right? And our insurance runs through the end of the year from the time you get it. So that leaves the towns that possibility. So all of those things went into the decision-making process. And then, of course, when we had to cancel the season, I think it's important for people to know, when they look at the data that we're going to give them, being really transparent about, what we take in and what we spend and how we spend, that the vast majority of our spending happens prior to the main spring season, before the first face-off even happens. So it gets pretty complicated. We're a big league. We do things professionally. We try to do them right. But even though most of our members are volunteers and the board is all volunteers, we hire professional help so we can do this right. I'll stop there, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you. Mary, we'll throw this next question to you, kind of obviously a big question. If you could talk about how the financials and refunds were looked at and decided upon during that same time frame. The biggest question to most people is the $40 that they paid for the 2020 MBYLL membership, and why they didn't get any of that money directly back from MBYLL, and what happened per se with their $40.
Sure. Well, we are a membership organization, and when we were forced to cancel the season, we immediately began to cut expenditures, really bringing it down to only exactly what we were already committed to. As Jim said, many of our expenses are incurred before the start of the spring season: the insurance, the staff, the scheduler. And then when we were looking at how to grant refunds, the logistics of extending partial refunds on the player membership, we looked at it, but the logistics were really difficult. We couldn't extend them through the credit card system. So at that time, our volunteer treasurer would have been writing individual checks or issuing individual checks for those player memberships. And then we were going to have to additionally reduce those refunds by the cost of the postage and the processing. So what we decided to do was ultimately send those refunds back directly to the towns. The towns were also struggling with their own issues on the canceled season, their own challenges. And we felt that getting it back into the hands of the town would then give those town directors who know the families, help them as much as possible financially, as well as them knowing the families and knowing how to best support their families and extend as much refund as they could to their families with those for their town player tuitions. And we know that
Mary,
there's, go ahead.
Can I throw one thing in, Mary, while you're thinking there?
Please.
I think it's just important for parents to note that we also, on several occasions, made sure all of the town directors, through our region meetings, et cetera, knew that if someone was facing a hardship, a family, we would get them their $40 back. We would take care of them and make them completely whole. By the same token, doing that, league wide would have basically put us out of business, and we would have been in a lot of trouble for the spending that we had contracted to do.
Great.
Sorry about that, man. Just
No
wanted to
problem.
jump in.
No,
Well,
that's really, not to take away from how partial refunds would have been helpful to those individual families. We made the decision to get that money back to the towns.
Yeah, I mean, $10 to folks is not going to do a whole lot and potentially put us in jeopardy, right? Which we'll talk more about as we go through this.
Jim, I'll throw this next one to you. If you could talk a little bit about the Town Youth Lacrosse Preservation Fund that the board put together last summer.
Yeah, sure. We do have some reserves from past years, even though this past year we were in a losing budget or a loss where right away, and this goes back to the first part of this video, that another thing I didn't mention is we really cut all discretionary spending right away when this virus hit. We have some contracts that we have to pay and things like that. But as far as tightening our belt on discretionary spending, we did that right away. So the Town Preservation Fund really comes from past year's reserves, right? Not this last budget, but we do have reserves, and we've done a good job of not spending those and keeping them to make us more stable and to be able to use towards our mission as we grow. And so, it's a rainy day. It's time to use any of the rainy day, funds, or use a substantial amount of those as you need to. And so one of the uses for those funds, because we're going to talk more about a couple of uses, but one is to make a town preservation fund. I believe we funded it with $60,000 and said, that's really about keeping programs going in towns that they can, go in their regions and petition to have some of those funds to run programs. And we did do several of those, as well as keeping those funds to preserve and help towns that might be worried about folding. There are things that we're doing to waive fees now for towns that are struggling and having hardship, and we're trying to help them out. And those preservation funds are key to that effort to try to keep things alive in towns that are really struggling right now. I'll stop there, Kev.
Great. All right. Thank you guys very much. And we'll stop right here and move on for section 3 in a minute.